beautiful mama. So I wanted to continue on the thread from another video I made about informed consent, because I feel that if you've just watched that in isolation to other videos that I've made, you may be thinking, why is she, making such a point about that? And what is this obstetric violence? And it just sounds like fear-mongering and, it just sounds negative. Now, the reason that I focused on informed consent, and the reason I want to talk a little bit more today about just owning your birth experience really and staying in your power, is because the birthing world truly is in crisis. I have seen it time and time again with many, many women that I've helped coach, where they have come out, really traumatized and feeling violated from their birth experience. And I'm really here to try and warn you, to try and avoid this from happening to you and your baby, to try and protect you essentially with the stories of others, to ensure that you don't have to go through the same cruel, hideous experience. And you may be thinking, well, come on, why on earth would hospitals, especially if this is your first time birth, why would the medical staff in a hospital setting, set out to deliberately, intentionally, calculatedly derail my natural birth? Why would anyone want to create catastrophe around something that is just physiological, a normal process? Because catastrophizing ultimately leads to hastily made decisions that can be, hugely detrimental to the outcome. And surely the medical community in hospital setting, in any setting, has a legal and moral obligation to disclose the whole truth and nothing but the truth, and to be there to care for you and your baby's interests above and beyond anything else. So surely they wouldn't manipulate, surely they wouldn't throw their own bias on things, and surely they wouldn't sabotage and hijack a natural birth. That's what I thought too, before I'd heard all of these stories, and there are just too many of them to ignore. Now, there are two reasons, or three I guess, but two main reasons why this may happen in a hospital setting. Firstly, and the main reason is because medical professionals genuinely believe that natural birth is something that needs to be controlled and monitored and is of grave danger to both mother and child. Most of these medical professionals have never seen a natural physiological birth unfold. They have only ever been present when there is an emergency C-section at hand. And therefore, they are genuinely looking at birth as something that's really perilous and fraught with great risk. They're not accustomed to just seeing the beautiful unfolding of how the female body works if it's given enough support and love and the right environment to do what it can do to the best of its ability. They haven't been trained on that. Even just the environment itself, you've got a sterile room, a hospital room to all intents and purposes, which is very inconducive to feeling relaxed, right? Even the smells alone aren't. The lighting is really bright. Then you've got that really quite daunting looking bed, it doesn't look like cozy, beautiful covers and we can get into. You've got machines and monitors and beeping. That is just not how birth is meant to unfold. And that's the first kind of contact these medical professionals have with the birthing world. So how are they supposed to know any better? If they were taught for a mama to give birth in the best way possible, she needs to have low lighting, she needs to have privacy, she needs to have minimal sound, she really shouldn't be having any interruptions, definitely no beeping machines or things to freak her out. The environment needs to be of great beauty and comfort to her. So no sterile rooms, no ugly beds, beautiful bed sheets, beautiful pillows, candles burning, fairy lights, essential oil smells, calming music, all that kind of thing is what would actually be conducive to having a birth. But that is not what they're accustomed to seeing when they go into a birth room. So they have no idea. They were never trained in this. So it's not because they're sadistical, evil people that they end up hijacking your birth experience. It's because that's how they genuinely have been taught, and that's what they genuinely believe. Sometimes they change their mind if they're actually the patient. Like there have been quite a few midwives that when they finally had their own baby, that may think actually that was not how I would want to repeat it, and they see it through different eyes. But when they're seeing it through the eyes of a caregiver, they truly believe that their role is to monitor and control. And a lot of the caring is just left to the husband or the doula or the mum. There's very little interaction with speaking to mother, asking her how she really feels, maybe just touching her, asking if she needs a drink or something. That's not what they perceive their role to be as, because that's never how they were taught. And then there's another line of thought that basically says, yeah, there's another group of people that truly are very patriarchal, which means very male dominant led, and even misogynistic, which is like a dislike of women. And there is that group. I've been at the end of it a few times, and a lot of the women I've been working with have also. It's definitely not an accident. It's very deliberate, the way that they bully, abuse, manipulate and throw bias at birthing women and pregnant women. And it's very unpleasant. But when you're in their environment, and because you're genuinely perplexed as to why someone would be doing that to you if they're the role of a caregiver, often women don't speak up and speak out that they don't like the way they're being treated, and to please stop doing that now, and that they'd like someone else to actually take over, because they're not used to this environment, and they're not used to being spoken to that way, and they end up doubting themselves essentially and allowing things to happen to them which they would normally, in normal circumstances, never allow to happen to them, because in a normal circumstance they would be more informed. They wouldn't necessarily be on the turf of somebody else, where they're overpowering you. And they'd have support by somebody who is already very prolific in that area. But your husband hasn't been to a birth before, I'm taking, or maybe once or twice. But a hospital setting is not what your husband's accustomed to either. And we tend to have this white coat syndrome, whatever nationality, gender we are, the minute someone has a white coat on, we are generally speaking very subservient, and we think, well, they must know best. But I'm here to challenge you and to say, how could a male consultant who has only ever seen emergency birth situations, that's not a natural physiological birth unfolding, how could he possibly know more than you about natural birth, even if you've never given birth yourself yet? Because your body, your female body, has been able to grow this baby, conceive this baby, and it can damn well birth this baby. Just because it seems miraculous and impossible doesn't mean that it is impossible. It is miraculous, it's incredible, but it's nothing to be feared, and it's certainly nothing to be controlled. And it's something we should actually be holding up in awe and reverence as to how freaking awesome we are, rather than thinking we need to be rescued from this experience. We don't need to be rescued. We need to be in our power with no one else interfering for us to truly be able to unfold in this magical experience. Saying that you need help and that you can't do it, and that, we need to manipulate these women into just bloody well lying down on their backs, and we'll prize the baby out with a ventouse or a forceps, or God forbid even a C-section, because that's safer. And that's what they need. And even if they don't want it, that's what they're going to bloody well have, because that's quicker and, in my opinion, safer, because I've been trained that way. I don't know the other way. That attitude is like saying to top athletes who have been, running a marathon for 3 hours long, and it's been really tough, and they're sweating and they're struggling. It's like sending a paramedic team down there when they're just about to finish their run, and, strapping things to them and saying, God, no, stop. You're exhausting yourself, don't continue. When that's their moment of power, when they were just about to finish, when they were about to achieve one of the biggest things they could ever have achieved in their life. We don't need rescuing or saving, thank you very much. men especially, you know, we don't need that. And the third point that I kind of alluded to when I said, why does this happen in hospitals, is, believe it or not, you know, there is a huge history, if you look back, men overbearing women with their power. They don't like women being all powerful. They don't like women even knowing that they're capable of such greatness, because they like to control us. And I know that sounds really conspiracy theory-esque, but it really isn't. Like, our culture nowadays comes from a much darker culture in the past. You just have to Google 14th to 18th century witch hunts, which included basically any woman that was powerful or outspoken, to see that women got burned live at the stake for all kinds of bollocks, that men decided we were evil. So the fact that they found us attractive, it was our sexuality that did that to them, that changed them, that made them animalistic, and we were demonic in that power, and therefore we deserved to die. And even, like, you know, young girls, grandmas were burned at the stake. It's just sick. And this was all supported by the church, and it was just standard doctrine. And people would tell on powerful women just to make sure that they were safe. So that's our background, and that's not even that long ago. That ended kind of in the 1800s. So, you know, 200 years ago, and that has very much continued into our present day, because women are often spoken to, especially the minute we conceive, we're pregnant and birth, as if we are children, as if we couldn't possibly handle this without their help, you know, without the patriarchal medical system's help. And let's be honest, the machines and the beeps and the scans and the C-sections being so common has only been around for about 60 years. So I don't see how the whole human race has got here just based on the last 60 years. We've been around for 300,000 years. What we need is to be very clear through education, through, you know, really researching a lot about how, you know, natural physiological birth works, how our bodies work, how our babies' bodies work in symphony with our own bodies. We need to be armed with information and knowledge, okay? So that this doesn't happen to us anymore. So yeah, I hope that really helps. I hope that sheds some light on it as to why I'm so insistent on making sure that you avoid basically being a lamb going to the slaughter. It can be avoided. You don't need to fear hospitals if you are armed. Even better if you can go in with a doula who's got a lot more experience in this field than you. I myself had my first birth in hospital, and it was beautiful. Yes, they did initially try and strap me up to machines and stuff, but I very quickly said, actually, I don't want that. And I don't want anyone to check how dilated I am. And actually, you know what? I don't want anyone in my space. So if I need you, I'll call you, but don't come to me. And they respected it. I mean, it was in England, so I think they're a lot more respectful of that. I had my doula, I had my husband, and I gave birth completely unassisted, you know. The midwives weren't even in the room. It was a bit of a surprise because I was sitting on the toilet for the last pushes that I didn't really realise was the last pushes. And my doula said to me, you really need to, like, get closer to the bed to deliver the baby because he's going to be born in the toilet otherwise. And I was like, really? She was like, yeah, you're very close. And I was like, oh, okay. So my husband and Caroline, my doula, I had one under both of my armpits, and we kind of walked as fast as I possibly could in between the contractions, but I didn't make it to the bed. And Luca was born on the floor. And I was sort of in a standing up crouched position. And that's when all the midwives came in, because the umbilical cord split and there was blood everywhere, but he was absolutely fine and, you know, started breastfeeding within minutes. Obviously that wasn't the way I pictured having him. I really hoped that my husband would have caught him, and I envisaged a water birth that was all set up in my home, and it was all supposed to be at home. But he loves that story now. He says he was a little bungee jumper, he thinks it's awesome, and it was really wonderful. The only part I would change is the fact that, yeah, he fell on the floor, and not that he was damaged in any way, because it was only about that much of a fall, but it was more the mayhem that it caused afterwards, because the midwives were all very worried that they would be sued and blah, 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 and that he's now brain damaged. But I mean, it was absolutely fine. And if you look at most animals in the wild, their babies also fall from a height. Some animals lie down, but a lot of them don't. So it was all good. But what I'm trying to say is that I'm not trying to fearmonger you about hospitals specifically. They can be absolutely fine, as can birthing centres, but you just need to go in making darn sure that they know that you're calling the shots and not them. And most of them will respect that if you come across very confidently. The problem is when you go in and you literally hand over all your power that you don't even realise is handing over your power because you think you don't even have any, and you just think, well, they're the experts, they're the ones wearing the white coats, they're the ones that have seen countless births, so I'm not going to question anything they say. And then often you'll just get led down a path, which is the path that they've learnt, which is often called a cascade of interventions, which can result in things happening to you that you never ever envisaged happening to you, like episiotomies, like a forceps delivery, like an emergency C-section, like being torn to shreds down there because you've taken pain relief that you couldn't feel anything when you pushed, and so you destroyed your pelvic floor. So all that can be avoided with knowledge and support. So anyway, if you enjoyed listening to this, then please, just hit the subscribe button or click on the links below to see the next video. But I really hope that's been helpful in making you realize how much you need to arm yourself with knowledge. And there are, many fonts of wisdom out there that can help you with that. I also can help you with that with my Blissful Birthing course. But, you really, really do need to do that homework. It is worth the investment. It is worth it for you and your baby, I promise. Okay, sending you so much love. And I wanted to add as well to the previous video that I just made that the other reason that the medical establishment may try to coerce or manipulate the way that your natural birth unfolds is because of money. And I know at first this sounds really cynical and maybe controversial, but it's really true. I used to be a medical sales rep for Johnson & Johnson for 7 years, and I had to, my role was basically teaching consultants how to use the devices that I sold. So a lot of it was for open surgery, some of it was for keyhole surgery, and my role wasn't just teaching surgeons how to use the equipment and training them and training the nursing staff. My role was also how to get business cases put together so that the finance department in the NHS would, make a budget to buy the devices. So we had to do lots of different business cases showing how, by changing a procedure from, let's say, an open gallbladder removal to keyhole one, would actually save the hospital and the trust a lot of money, even if the equipment itself was 3-4 times more expensive, because the procedure could be carried out as a day case versus a procedure which would have people in recovery for many days on end, which would then cost the hospital money in the room that they were occupying, the drugs they would need to give them, etc. So I learned years ago how hospitals are given codes for certain procedures, and each code is related to a figure, what the hospital will then be granted by the government. And that's how it works in the UK. In the US, obviously it's all insurance companies, and in the private hospitals in England, it's the insurance companies that pay as well. So in our equivalent of Bupa or whatever, we would also have the code that we'd have to put forward to the business manager or the finance director of the hospital, and he would then get a financial reward for that particular code which related to a particular procedure. So what I'm trying to say in a very roundabout way is that if a hospital puts down, it's performed a cesarean or a C-section that has a specific code that is 3 to 4 times more in the financial reward given to the hospital by the insurance companies or by the government, depending on which country you're in, than a normal natural birth that had no interventions. Of course, if you have a natural birth that does have interventions, be that with drugs like Pitocin or an epidural, then you'd have to add other codes on for the medications to get more of a financial reward and justification for doing that procedure. So some of you may be thinking, well, okay, like, you know, yeah, a C-section does require a consultant's time to do the procedure. It does require the operating room. It does require the use of medication. So of course, it costs more, and therefore they should be reimbursed for more money than if it was a natural birth with no drugs and, you know, very few of the medical team required to assist. However, these figures are massively inflated. Often, for example, women are turfed out of hospital, if not within hours, within very short days, and that was a massive medical procedure that was performed on their abdominal cavity. They're not interested in caring for them afterwards and spending loads of money on the drugs and on the bed and on the nurses looking after them. They want them out of there quick smart so that they can keep the profits, right? And C-sections can be performed very quickly. I mean, I was just watching a video the other day that you can see on YouTube as well, where I was observing this young woman giving birth, and within 6 hours of coming into the hospital, having had no signs of labour whatsoever, they managed to extract the baby from her via an emergency C-section, which I strongly believe, you know, was to their financial gain, and meant that they could, you know, free up space for the next woman coming in very quickly. Whereas if you're dealing with a woman labouring in a natural way, it can take days for the baby to come, and that's entirely normal, I might add. There is no such thing as a baby that's supposed to come within a certain time frame, which usually the gynecologist has decided is the right amount of time before the baby's in distress. So basically anything under 10 hours. But that usually is not the case. And that would cost them money, just, you know, giving the woman a bed and her just taking up their room. So yeah, be aware of that motivation as well when I say that there are motives to derail your natural birthing process, and the money one is a big one, because obviously if the hospital gets given a lot more money for doing certain procedures, then the kickback to the consultants is also very real. Sad but true. And if you don't believe me, just watch Ricki Lake's The Business of Being Born, which goes into this in a lot more depth. Right, that's it. So as I always say, just click the button below to subscribe if you'd like to hear similar content like this, and I'll see you in the next video.